Is it working? Yeah, it is. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. And first of all, I would like to thank very much Rector Sironi and Paolo for inviting me to this amazing event. Yes, I'm a UNHCR worker, and it brings some oxygen to my brain to be here, because usually I'm on the docks or in studio, TV studio, so it's great to take time to listen to research and such amazing reasoning around the current situation. So let's try to answer to these very tricky questions. So to the first one, if you were Minister of G20 country, well, you know, 86% of refugees in the world are living in non-industrialized countries. This is something we should really think about. They are not living in Europe, they are not living in the United States. This brings me to think about the fact that actually the situation of the refugees and displaced in the world changed a lot in the past 5-6 years. It's true that there is a big problem in terms of conflict resolution, and of course we have more conflicts. We have spillover of conflicts that are producing higher and higher numbers of displaced and refugees. It's also true that most of the conflicts nowadays are not conflicts among states, but there are internal conflicts. So maybe the interest in resolving, bringing solution to these conflicts is lower nowadays. But we are also seeing that these conflicts are producing a very, powerful effect, and that this effect is very visible also now in industrialized country. Something I think we should also think about is that the principle of international cooperation, it is a principle that is given for granted, of course, but I think it is very modestly put in place to relieve the burden of countries who are taking the most of the responsibilities with asylum seekers and refugees. Well, at UNHCR, we prefer not to use the term burden. Actually, our language is responsibility sharing, taking the responsibility, not the burden. But what about considering the responsibility sharing of refugees as an expression of the principle of international cooperation? It is something that it is not given for granted at all. In my job, I also work a lot with international cooperation, and actually a very actual debate is the one especially between NGOs and governments, about the fact that NGOs are very much worried about the fact that international and development aid might be shifted toward refugees. Well, it is something strange, but of course it should be should be also granted for refugees assistance and refugee integration, in consideration of the fact that refugees and displaced are living in non-industrialized countries, okay? And also we should think about the fact that, you know, the average length of a refugee condition is 17 years, 17. That means that, of course, food and shelter is not enough, or not enough anymore. We cannot address this kind of situation with emergency assistance, emergency relief. We need a long-term planning, long-term strategies. Less than a month ago, I was in Lebanon, and I've been in Lebanon several times during the past 3 years. And what struck me a lot was the different setting, the different things I was seeing in the street. 3 years ago, it was difficult to see refugees in the street. You could see refugees in their houses. They were, in a way, they were less visible. Nowadays, you see Syrian refugees at every corner. You see refugees everywhere, sitting, asking for money. You see children working in the street. And you really feel that this is becoming a long-term issue that should be addressed with a development eye, not anymore with a humanitarian and immediate relief one. We are very happy about the fact that there are several initiatives that are starting. One very relevant is the one taken by the World Bank in its spring meetings, gave a lot of attention for new financing tool to address refugee protected situation in those countries that are taking most of the responsibility. Take Jordan, for example. Jordan is a teeny country and have a huge number of refugees in comparison of what Europe is assisting. It is not a very rich country, and they were facing a big problem in terms of opening the labor market to Syrian refugees. By the way, Syrians were already present in the country. They were owning a lot of enterprises and shops and restaurants. But until now, I mean, their policies were very restrictive in terms of giving access to the labor market. A Syrian refugee should pay $500 US dollars to get a regular permit for a regular job. And so basically no one could afford that. But now Jordan is easing up very much the access to the labor market. And it's not the case. I mean, Jordan was very interested in this kind of loan program or debt swap program that big institution like World Bank could put in place. Of course, access to jobs is a key driving factor for integration. And we also think, and today we talked a lot about resettlement. It is not only resettlement. There is a full range of legal pathways that could be adopted immediately if just the political will would be there. I mean, we have resettlement, but we know that resettlement, yes, is more costly and usually traditionally is a very lengthy process. Resettlement goes through UNHCR, because it goes through a selection of vulnerabilities that takes a lot of time and that have to match with the pledges and the characteristics that are expressed by the receiving country. But we have many other ways for opening legal pathways. Of course, family reunification, but even in terms of labor mobility. We might think about a scheme for labor mobility that could match the capacity and skills of refugees with the need of specific labor markets. And we also think that when a refugee or better an asylum seeker is trying to stabilize in a country, let's think about a European country, well, the waiting period, the asylum seeker period, the period in which he's waiting or she's waiting to be here by the Commission for Asylum, should be considered a key part of the process of integration of refugees. This might last 6 months up to 1 year, and it can represent for individuals a key period in the development of the educational, vocational training, employment prospects. It's, believe me, very important. I've seen too many refugees, asylum seekers in Europe, even in Germany, not only in Italy, becoming very depressed about this waiting period because they cannot express themselves. They have a very clear idea of what they want to do, no matter if they are, I do not know, mechanics or a surgeon, but they have idea, they have project, and just to stay 6 up to 8 months without doing nothing, it's really a big loss. And then, yes, of course, asylum seekers sounds odd, but they should be allowed to work, because the positive contribution that they can make in the economic, social, and cultural life must be absolutely recognized. There should be, in this sense, also an effort in the society to involve them and recognize more the process of the refugee integration. Should not be given for granted this should be a failure at all. We should find a way with a number of subjects to celebrate the positive developments of a refugee integration. We should involve the private sector. We should involve the entrepreneurs into the integration process and celebrate good things to show to the big public and that these are things that can be done, and also to lower the negative perceptions. In this sense, we also think that employers and unions need to be sensitized much more about refugees and to become more involved in refugee issues. We know, take the example of Italy, about the big problem of the involvement of the economic migrants workers in the irregular labor market, but we never talk about refugees in that. We should involve the unions much more on that aspect. And also forms of investment in terms of giving financial encouragement for refugees enterprises and for the individuals that are working in this sphere. You know, last week, a big entrepreneur, an American of Syrian origin, he has been a refugee. He is now the owner of a huge company producing yogurt in the United States, became a donor. I mean, he created a big empire, and now he's a donor. I mean, refugees, they suffer so much, but usually this sufferance is only waiting to be expressed in a way to give and to create something positive out of them, okay? So they have actually a very high level of resilience. I mean, falling a bit into psychology, but it's like that. I mean, they are very, very resilient people, and we should also consider that, take that into consideration. Question 2, if you were a minister of development country responsible for your country's asylum policy, would your policy response differ? No, it wouldn't, but again, I would advocate a lot for stronger support from investors and richer countries. And, you know, now things are changing a bit. I mean, when we at UNHCR now are meeting with representatives of non-industrialized countries, they are starting to say, okay, but I mean, you are asking us big efforts in terms of containing the refugees flows, and you are saying that we have to improve our asylum system, we have to do capacity building of our border guards, but, well, why? I mean, Europe is asking so much to us, especially African countries, if Europe, that is hosting just a teeny portion of the refugees, is not taking and honoring its responsibility. So you see, I mean, it's very unbalanced, but this also risks to create unbalanced relations, not also in terms of international diplomacy and relationships. And question 3, if you were refugees from one of the major sources, would you seek for asylum and your family? What would be the necessary economic conditions? Okay. We usually think about refugees as people that are with no skills that would stay wherever. I think, especially for Europe, this is not the case. They have very clear ideas about where they want to go. Of course, many times the ideas are a bit of a word of mouth, so they might have an ideal perspective that is not corresponding to the reality. When we speak about Germany, this is the case. But in a globalized world, mobility, communication, information, and education aren't anymore an exclusive prerogative of Western and richer portion of humanity. And of course, refugees and asylum seekers, that are people like us that are undergoing through difficult circumstances, but they are like us, they are seeking for better social condition, and therefore they are trying to settle in countries where they can get a higher rate in terms of integration and also in terms of democracy, yes. Especially because most of the asylum seekers and refugees, and here I'm talking also in terms of what is happening in Europe, are very young. They are very young people, young families with very young kids. So what they are looking is good education, a job, and a society where they can freely express themselves. So, well, coming to conclude, I would just like to mention the situation in Europe. It's very dysfunctional. We have hundreds of thousands of migrants and refugees that have crossed, transiting many countries. Individual states are facing situations that were absolutely not foreseen when drafting the EU legislations about asylum. And as a consequence, after summer 2015, the states have started to take unilateral decisions that are not tackling the problem, but are just shifting the problem from one state to another, and the latest solution has been to externalize the solution of the problem. That is basically what is happening with the EU-Turkey deal. This shows how urgently a joint response is needed to protect refugees, but also to protect migrants. It's not under our mandate to deal with economic migrants, but we strongly think that solutions are needed for economic migrants as well, not only for refugees. So to conclude, our message to Europe is pull yourself together and really deal with yourself, because the Europe help is absolutely needed, and we cannot surrender to the fact that decisions are being taken by politics rather than facts. So the current choices, unfortunately, are poisoning a lot the relations among states, spreading distrust, but are also poisoning the public perception, and the negative effects are in front of our eyes. So also your help, the help of university and researchers, is very much needed in bringing some rationalities in this current context. Thank you.